And I'll start here with Jenny being closest to me. And as we go down, just tell us what you've written in the way of children's books and how you got the idea. That's all.
The two that I have out are not really children's books on the level that we're talking today. Mine are more high school level, and it's a coming of age tale, a morality tale about good versus evil, but rather than say to these kids, you got to read this book because it's going to tell you how to grow up, we wrapped it in a lot of adventures. There's a supernatural wolf and a 1,000-year-old goddess, and they're running around in medieval Europe and that kind of stuff. But what I'm basically up here today for is more to tell you from a technical standpoint, if you've got questions about illustrations and how to size them and all of the technical issues and the costs of color versus black and white. I have plans for another series of books that will be more 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, maybe based on some stories that I invented. I had a 45-minute drive both ways to work when my daughter was small and needed to keep her occupied, and came up with a series of stories. So one of these days, if I ever stop editing and get back to writing, I might tackle them.
Yeah.
Well, I'm an eclectic author. I have inspirational books, I have self-help books, I have a memoir, and I have 2 children's books. And I'm only telling you that because my children's books sell. This is my best-selling book of all the ones I've done. And I think it's the appeal of the cover, for one thing. And the author was Libby Farmer. She did wonderful watercolors, and she passed away with pancreatic cancer in 2020. Excuse me, but she was a wonderful artist, and we took this picture. It was a photograph of a possum I found online years ago, and I had her change it enough so that we couldn't get in trouble for using it. And the way I got the ideas for the books was on Polly Possum's Wandering Path. My husband and I were sitting on the pool deck, and I looked over and saw a little baby possum wandering around the edge of the yard sniffing, and she never looked up, and she went around the hedges and she just never looked up. So and later that night I went to close the slider at the kitchen door, and she was standing right there looking up, let me in. So after I got through screaming, I shut the door and I got the idea that this would make a good book. This cat book, I had a friend, I was going to take an early childhood education course at Redlands U, and my assignment was to write a book for small children. This one came first, and I just had no idea how to do it. And one day I was on the phone with a friend who had dementia, and I thought, what can I talk to Alice about? Some of you may have known Alice Sabin, and she loved cats. And I thought, well, I can talk about this cat that showed up. And I started telling her about all the antics of Buddy, and I got off the phone and said, I can write the book about Buddy. So that's how I got the idea for these 2 books.
Hi. I tend to write adult books. I did write a young adult book when I didn't want to sell my adult books to some children or junior high or high school age. But I'm not really a children's book writer. My mother, this is all her stories and her poems and stuff. She was a 1st grade teacher, and she wanted to be published a lot. So the thing I did, it was after she passed though, I took a couple of her books and I illustrated them myself, and this is the result of one that she and I had tried to illustrate or publish before all of the way we can publish now with the computers and Amazon and KDP and all that. And then I illustrated this one.
This guy can't see
over here, so. Sorry. So we also, my sister and I then hired a professional illustrator for her 100th birthday to illustrate one of her best stories. This one won an honorable mention with, Writer's Digest, the contest they do every year. So I paid to have this one illustrated, to have a professional. And then my niece said to me one day, she's a first grade teacher, she said, "Aunt Berta, why don't you write me a children's book with a ghost in it?" because she was talking about writing and books with her class. So I did that. So this is my one children's book that I did write, and I paid to have it illustrated with fiber. And so I guess when we get to that part of the program, I'm going to talk a little bit about the cost of illustrating and how you can do it economically and that type of thing.
Thank you, and good morning. I think my children's book, my first one, How the Blue-Tongued Skink Got His Blue Tongue, took about 20 years in the making. The idea came around in the 90s. And my brother-in-law called, and he was refinancing his house and in financial trouble. And he says, but for this month, I sold a blue-tongued skink and paid my mortgage. Going, oh my gosh, what's a blue-tongued skink? First of all, and I had been to Australia. They're native to Australia. I'd never seen any there, even went to the zoo there. But apparently they're all over. You have to watch when you back your car out of the driveway that you don't hit a blue-tongued skink. They're all over. They're harmless. They live for about 20 years. So I got online and started researching blue-tongued skinks. And I have since even adopted one from curiosity. And I'm really into blue-tongued skinks now. So I started thinking about that idea. That's unusual to have a blue tongue. And I had done other writing. And so over the years, different things occurred to me. I believe that kids should have a Bible as Lit course. I was a secondary teacher. And I often use children's literature to teach concepts like the Vietnam Wall. There's some really good kids' books out there. And I think the best kids' books appeal to all ages and have a lesson or something to say to all ages. So anyway, I started thinking I could put the skink in the garden. And of course, I didn't call it the garden. But then I thought bullying came along, and I thought I could show all the ways that the serpent bullies Eve, and bullies together, they bully a skink. And he could offer them something nearby instead of the fruit of that tree that would turn his tongue blue. So anyway, that's pretty much the story. And I wove some facts about skinks in there, some different ways that people get bullied. And the story came to fruition. But I don't know if it ever would have if it wasn't for the Writers Club, because that very first wordsmiths group that met at Marilyn King's house, I read the story because I had to bring something. It was open genre, and nobody was really interested in poetry. And so I read The Blue-Tongued Skink, and Ann Fowler came to me. There was going to be a reading at Barnes & Noble. And she said, we want you to read. And I said, okay, I could dust off some poetry. She goes, we don't want your poetry. We want that story. And I thought, oh my gosh, they really like it. So I read it at Barnes & Noble. And then I wanted to traditionally publish, but the breaker with that was after many compliments. One woman said, oh, I love it, I love it. And she says, but I'd never publish it. So I said, well, why not? And she said, because I don't believe in that myth. I don't believe in that story. I thought, oh my gosh. And then I thought, she could have been one of my English students. What am I listening to her for? So I started, I went with Mindster Media, which is like dog-eared. It's one of those, indie publishers. And broke off from them. I found my illustrator through her, though, Samantha Kickingbird. She's a middle school art teacher in Oklahoma. And she's working on my third book now. So she's done that one, and she's done The Gull Who Thought He Was Dull. In the meantime, we both split from Mindster Media, and we just both split because we could do it cheaper, and Dave said, well, let's start our own company. So we started Another Think Coming, and my husband republished this. with help from Samantha Kickingbird. So we've had a relationship for years. I've never met her, but like I say, she's working on my third one, and she is expensive, but I have a savings account just for her.
I have a comment real quick. I just want to say that I was watching Jeopardy a few weeks ago. I don't know very many of the answers, but when they ask about a lizard with a blue tongue, I immediately thought of Mary. I said, "It's a skink," and nobody knew it but me. I could have won some money.
Thank you, Ann. There you are.
Thank you. Yeah, a blue-tongued skink. It reminds me of a red-tongued skunk. I mean, you think they're like in the same family or something? I don't know. All right. So I have another question. I'll just pass the mic this way again. You've all written other books. How was this different? What special things did you have to learn to do? If anything.
Yeah, well, it's fiction, so I guess this one was my first fiction one. And I sort of knew, but not explicitly, the hero's journey. So I think it should follow the hero's journey, where you have to take the main character to his or her lowest point, and there has to be a problem or a dilemma, preferably, that the character has to solve. So that's kind of how I went, and revised many times.
I found it a lot easier than writing a novel because, first of all, it's much shorter. And like she said, you do give your character a problem and you solve the problem. And I don't know, it just came. Also, I love ghosts, so that helped too. Okay.
I don't have the imagination to write fiction, and so these two books are based on truth. The main thing I learned was that you do have to make trouble for your character. And that character has to get out of trouble by itself. You can't say, "Oh, Mom came along and solved the problem." This character has to figure it all out. This one, she got lost, and she figured out how to find her way back home because she remembered her mama told her that if she ever got lost, to put her puffy little possum paws together and pray. It's all alliterated. This one, I didn't know that about. But it's basically about, it has a theme of sort of being adopted, being accepted, moving to a new place, having someone new move into your neighborhood and accept it, and those kinds of things. So, but the main thing I learned really was that you have to give the main character a dilemma, and they have to solve it themselves.
The biggest issue with mine, my late husband and I wrote them, and we were going to make one whole novel out of it. We ended up making two. We had most of what ended up being the first book done and a part of the second book, and thought we were ready to go to publication. And he passed away, and it sat for a while. Just emotionally, I couldn't get back to writing it. But when I got back to it, and remember, these are set in the 1100s in Europe, and I started looking at a lot of the references we had in there as far as comments. And one of the guys said, "Give me a minute, I'll get that done." And the next guy, a little bit later, is they rode for 4 hours and stopped for lunch. And I started to think, I don't think they had really accurate ways of telling time in those early years. And they maybe had sundials, but they didn't have minutes and hours and those kinds of time frames in their conversation. So I had to go back and rewrite the entire thing and say they rode from sun up until the sun was directly overhead. And then, the guy says, "Hang on, I haven't quite got that done yet." And you don't realize how often things of time, just the word time or minutes or those kinds of things, we just use them without thinking. And I think I had probably close to 100 references that I had to take out so that I wasn't talking about a time frame, because they just didn't. So I'm real big on historical accuracy. So that was my major issue.
Thanks, Jenny. Regarding illustrators, let me ask a couple of questions, and then we'll see what you all have to say about it. How did you find your illustrator? How important do you think good illustration is for a children's book? And What about the price range? I imagine it varies quite a bit. Jenny?
Prices can range from free to hundreds of dollars. My books are not illustrated, so I'm just going from what I did for the covers. I use a site called Pixabay, and it's Pixabay, and they are growing by leaps and bounds. I'm sure they've got probably tens of thousands of submissions now. It's a free site, and they don't just have photographs. They have graphics, they have line art, they have pencil drawings. I mean, they have everything that you can imagine, and they are free. And they also don't limit you to what you can do with that image once you download it. There's a site called CanStock, which is very reasonable. Their prices range maybe $7 to $12. But you can get into Getty Images. I would advise you to stay away from Getty. Number one, Getty is extremely expensive, and they are very, very difficult. A lot of their licensing says that you can't do anything, including cropping the image that you buy. So Getty's difficult. I haven't worked with actual artists, so I'll let the experts talk to you about that one.
I'm not one of those experts. I happen to have friends that did my illustrations. I have other friends, including a granddaughter, that I've asked them to illustrate my book on my little miniature dachshund that I've written, and oh sure, would love to do it. And that was the end of that conversation. So I'm afraid I'm not good at that. So.
Well, like I say, I illustrated the first two books, children's books that were my mom's. And this one was actually started, I don't know, maybe even in the 70s. And I had pencil drawn it and colored pencil, and, we'd made up the book and all this stuff. So that was the first one that I went ahead and I did the illustrations myself, just using like PaintNet or something, not a professional, software thing. So when I wanted to do these books, I went with Fiverr. It's a company out there, and it's called Fiverr because they started out where you could hire for various things, not just illustrations, different things for $5. So it was called Fiverr. They have, people that work for them. I hired them to actually hired one of the people I found. For $36.75, I had this graphic made, and it looks just like my mom. So I could put this on her books. And then I looked, there are a ton of children's illustrators on Fiverr, and I just, looked at their style, whatever, and I found one, and then you contact them, and you also see the reviews of them, and, kind of how much they cost or whatever. And I had this one done. He had to do it in 2 parts. One of the good things about Fiverr is the company says you have to have the stuff done in this amount of time. So you don't hire somebody and then you maybe don't get it for a year, or you get it in dribs and drabs. It was on time, and we did split it in 2 so he could do the first part on time and then do the second part on time. And for 11 illustrations, he charged me $341.25. And for the next 11 illustrations, I don't know why it's different, it was $346.50. And then you can give them a tip at the end. You write your little, what you think. But the artist, he's in Malaysia, and so it was just less expensive. And they are responsive. I mean, you write to them and you say, I need this changed, this changed, this changed. Like one of the illustrations is in a house, and it's at a sink. And he put something under the sink that couldn't be there, because then it couldn't operate as a sink. So you go back and you go, no, you got to change this and this. And he was very responsive, and he changed it. This book that my mom wrote, I hired a friend's daughter. The daughter's also a friend too, but anyway. And she's very talented. I love her art. I tried to hire another friend's daughter who had gone to Fullerton and was a talented artist. But she wanted to charge me far more than I was willing to pay. She'd never even done a book before. She didn't know necessarily, well, she wouldn't have put it together. I'm the one that put them together. And so I didn't go with her, and I made an offer to the other friend's daughter, which was reasonable. I offered $1,000, and it was for 15 illustrations. And, she's drawn all the time anyway, and making cards and doing this. And so it gave her an opportunity to have her name out there on something. And she loved doing it. My only problem with her was I would ask for certain things and I wouldn't get them. Like I told her up front, and I told her 3 times after that, I needed 300 dots per inch because you have to have the illustration strong enough for the printing process and to be accepted by KDP. I go through KDP. And ultimately, I'm the one that took her illustrations and made them 300 dots per inch. I went out on the internet and go, okay, how do you do this? And found a technique to do it, and it worked. Yay! Anyway, I would love to have my mom's books, more of them illustrated, but it is very expensive, and so it's something to think about.
Yeah, since Roberta told me about Fiverr, I have researched them, and I suggest you do look into Fiverr. And you can buy stock in Fiverr now. They're really growing, and it's individual consultants who tell you right online what they do and what their starting price is and things like that. But like I say, I found mine through Mindster Media. When I first I thought this would be my one and only children's book, so it was part of a package deal with Mindster Media that she would be the illustrator, and I talked to her by phone, and I really liked her, and she told me that I did something that no one has ever done before, and that was I went through the whole text and put, I want a picture here, I want a picture here, and I want the skink looking at the woman here, and I want this. And she said no one has ever done that page by page for her, which really made her job easier. And I have done that since with the other 2 as well. Working with friends and family, from past experience, I was leery about that, except for my mother, who's a watercolorist, and she did the picture for my poetry book. However, we sat down and talked, and she told me, and this is true, that every time you have that character, it has to be consistent. You want consistencies throughout. And she didn't want to tackle that. And so I said, so she was my first choice. Since I have talked to Barbara Parrish, and she said, oh, I can show you how to do your own. And I thought, no. But then, because I buy a lot of children's books for nieces, nephews, and kids, I saw this one and bought it, Zen Pig, and I thought, and it's doing very well because of his marketing. And the illustrations are so simple, and kids love it. And so it's kind of what kids are drawn to, and at events I do look at what they are drawn to. Like they are drawn to Anne's hedgehog, and they're drawn to the Missy, but different kids like different things. Things that you and I might think are garish, kids go to them. They like graphic comics, so there's no telling. So find somebody who will draw your character the way you want them to. Mine is expensive. I would say between $3,000 and $5,000 for 20 some pictures, 22 pictures. And it's cheaper if they put like a scene. Like in this one, this book was a little cheaper because it was a little smaller in size, but she also has some pages where there's more than one scene on the page. So, but in the first one, there's one picture per scene, and so that costs a little more. So find somebody you can work with. If it's family, it can get dicey because of the decisions that you have to be the one to make.
Yeah, I can see some of the issues. Can any of you address the subject of legalities? You know, I imagine most everything deals with who owns the product, and you take it from there. And go ahead with that, Mary, if you can.
Yeah, I won't say a lot, but make sure that you have the rights, all the rights to them, because that might not be possible if you go with somebody like Mindster Media, but they do have in their contract, have it in the contract that you have all the rights, because I just talked to Samantha about that recently because she's working on a Christmas one that's hopefully coming out soon. And I said, well, is there any problem with me making products from your art? So I've gone to Shuttlefly, and made a jigsaw puzzle out of the cover without the title. And my son he has a 3D printer, and for my birthday he made me little tiny books on the 3D printer of both my books, the Gull book and the other one. And you want to make bookmarks, you want to be able to make other products from it. So keep that in mind. All things you don't think about until you're in the process.
I did think about that, so when I did talk to the person I knew about the illustrations, yes, they were mine. I paid her and they were mine. I just flat out paid her. And with Fiverr, there's no issue with that either, because they're doing it for you. They're hired to do that for you. So I don't have a problem using the illustrations for my own use.
That never occurred to me. So I don't have any good answers for that, but I just remembered that Mary talking about the other products, I did make a CD of each of these, and I sold them for just the cost that it made me when I had a studio to go to, so that the children could listen to the CD and turn the pages and maybe learn the words.
And I will concur, it is absolutely an issue to make sure that when you're working particularly with an independent illustrator, that you've got your contract down tight. We've got a member of our club actually who worked with an illustrator, and the author did not know how to put the book together, so she not only asked the illustrator to do the illustrations, she asked her to format the book, and the artist did it, and our club member liked it a lot. And the next thing she knew, she turned around and it was already on Amazon under the illustrator's name, claiming the entire book. And our member called Amazon and they said, there's absolutely nothing we can do about it. You don't have a contract that specifies who does what. She uploaded it, she put the book together, it's her illustration, she can claim the book. And legally, Amazon couldn't do anything about it. So you really, really need to make sure you've got your rights down tight as the artist, because you might lose the book. Sorry.
Jenny, let's have you comment on the formatting challenges now and the stuff that you've...
Technical part.
Yeah, the stuff you've encountered.
I would say from my experience, I obviously, most of you know I edit, but I also do the formatting. I work in Photoshop. I'm not an artist, but I can manipulate your graphics and your photos and stuff when you give them to me. The number one thing that you have to know before you have your illustrator start doing anything is the size of your book. If you're gonna do like Ann's, she's got hers 8.5 by 11, and your artist is doing stuff in a 3 by 5 format, it's not gonna fit. 11 might be really nice, but Ann her concept was she wanted it to be landscape. She wanted it to be 11 inches across and 8.5 inches tall. You can't do that. It's called constraining your proportions when you're enlarging something. And most people think, well, that's easy. If I've got a 3x5 picture and I want to make it an inch bigger, it's just an inch on both sides. It'll go 4x6. No. Here's where the algebra comes in that you told your high school teacher you were never going to need again. You take your original size, and it's 3x5. Well, 5 is 1 1/3 times larger than 3. So if you enlarge your 3x5 and you want to make it 6, it's going to be 6x10, but that's okay. But if you're going to only just make it one more, you want to make it 4 inches across. It's not 4x6, it's 4x6 2/3. So there, you have to keep that mathematical formula. You solve for, you take the length of your original and you divide the short side by the long side. That gives you that number of what that proportion is. Then you figure out what your next size is and you multiply that C. You know, we're solving, here comes the algebra, A and B and C. You know what A is, you know what B is, you figure out C. You know what D is, you take D. D is the new size that one of your sizes you're going to enlarge to. D times that C that you came gives you E, which is your new length. So you've got a formula, and I've got it. If I've got a piece of paper, I can show you how to do all of that. But your artist has to know number one, what size your book's going to be. The second thing you've got to tell them is, do I want just small illustrations within the pages? Or do you want it to be a full page? A lot of the primary books, they like the entire full page to be an illustration. Great. Now, do you want it to be a full bleed? That means, do you want your drawings to basically run off your page? Or do you want it to be sized within your margins? So that's the next thing you need to know. Now, when you're talking about covers, you have to remember that when your printer does a cover, he's going to cut 1/4 of an inch off all the way around your cover. It's called the trim. The absolute worst thing I dealt with was a young kid who, number one, he drew it on lined elementary paper, the kind of grayish paper we used to have in like first grade. So you could see that, and he used colored pencils. And he did, and he gave me an 8.5 by 11 drawing, and the book was going to be 6 by 9. He had an elbow right at the extreme edge of one side of his drawing and the feet at the bottom. And the guy wanted it to be the full cover. I said, I can't do that. It won't. Number one, I can't take an 8.5 by 11 and make it a 6 by 9 without doing something. And number two, when I do that, he's going to lose his elbow and his feet. So you really have to nail down all of those technical issues. Do you want a single drawing for the entire cover, front and back? Or do you want to make them just kind of like pictures with frames around them, front and back? You have to have all of that stuff. You have to know. Otherwise, your artist is going to say, well, here, I drew it. And you're going to go, but it doesn't fit. And $3,000 later, she's redoing it. So, yeah, you have to figure all that stuff out first.
Details, huh? Got to nail them all down. Makes sense. Okay, talk to us about the title. How did you get the title? How did you come up with the name of the various books?
Mine, we started out, we were just going to call it Luke, and that doesn't say anything. Luke happens to be the name of the young boy who comes to manhood in the stories. So we decided, well, I like short titles. I don't like big, long ones. And so we decided that the first one would be Retribution, because what it is this team of superheroes goes out and starts to try to fix the wrongs that the powerful people, church and money people in the country are, preying upon the poor people. And then the second book, I thought, well, now what do I call it? Well, it resolves all of those issues, and they end up, living happily ever after, so to speak. So we named it Resolution. So to me, it's just a single thing. But like I said, it's not the children's books that the alliteration and the longer titles really make the book.
Well, my titles just go with the story. Polly Possum is all alliterated, so Polly Possum's Wandering Path worked. I started with Polly Possum's Path, but it didn't describe the story. I like to say that my favorite line in the book, and everybody else's is too, is that she licked a leaf of luscious leafy lettuce and liked it, and I had to practice to say that. So, and the story about the cat. I mean, he came and lived with us, so we just showed up and we took him in, and so that made it work.
Well, I titled this one Brinkley, the Kind-Hearted Ghost, because it describes me as kind-hearted. People may think he was inspired by Casper the Friendly Ghost, but he wasn't. When I was a kid, there was a children's story in my tall book of make-believe, and it was called Georgie, and he was a ghost. And he was a great ghost because he helped, without them knowing it, the elderly couple that lived in the house with him. Like he'd squeak the stairs and they would know to go to bed, that type of thing. So that's what inspired this story, because Brinkley is a kind-hearted ghost, and he's taking care of a family, though, with kids and the whole thing, and he does a lot more than squeak the things. Like he likes to put the dishes away for the mother. In the morning, they're all put away. And so...
Is he available for rent?
So Brinkley, I named him Brinkley, the kind-hearted ghost. And I've been sitting here thinking, because some people made the comparison to Casper, and I'm thinking, no, try Georgie. But anyway, if I were to change the title of this, I think I'd call it Brinkley, the Wellington's Ghost, because that would get it away from the Casper thing.
How the blue-tongued skink got his blue tongue. There's a whole tradition of stories through the ages, even oral stories way back, how the moon got in the sky, things like that. So that's kind of, and teachers give assignments like that sometimes too. So that's how I wound up with that title. And the other one, The Gull Who Thought He Was Dull, that one took me years, because Dave and I used to talk in the car about titles and wordplay. He loved wordplay. And we had settled on the Gullible Gull, no, let's see. The Gullible Gull. It had to do with the gullible gull. And then I would throw it out because I thought, that's going to mess up kids' spelling. They'll never understand. How am I going to explain? But I wanted to teach the word gullible to kids, too. And I wanted to make my character be a gullible guy, a gullible gull. And I wanted that alliteration. So for years, I went on that until I thought, okay, it's not going to work. And thought of The Gull Who Thought He Was Dull because it rhymes. And I did have a scene in here where Gus's brother says to him, "Oh, Gus, you're so gullible." I had to get that in. So, and he is gullible because he believes everything that other people tell him. So that's how I got my titles.
Thank you, Mary. Another question is, how long should a children's book be? And I imagine that it's correlated to the age range of the reader, but if you could address that.
I think mine come out to be about 1,200 words each, right around there, 1,000 to 1,200 words. And you can look up guidelines for different age levels of kids' books. Let's see how long. Also, your illustrator, you're going to pay by the number of illustrations, so that's a consideration too. And that's why you revise, just like other books that you write.
I'm not sure how I knew how long to make it. I just kind of looked at other books, and to tell you the truth, I looked at Mary's book and looked at how long hers was, because it seemed the right length. There was, a long time ago, a person in this group that wrote children's books, and I have that book, and it's for young children, but it kept going on, and I kind of lost interest, and so I don't even know if I ever finished that book, if you know, it's not that long. So I kept it simple. I tried to keep it interesting, keep it moving, and kept the number of pages to about 23, 25, something like that. So
I took a course from Institute of Children's Literature, correspondence course, and they were suggesting 500 to 700 words, and I don't know if that was just for my age group or not. My age group is 3 to 7. The next division would be 8 to 12 or 13 to 18 years old, but the printers want a minimum of 24 pages. Hold on for a second. Hold it over in front of me, please. Okay, my book didn't have 24 pages, so the illustrator made a page of all the characters in the book, and also the other book that at that time that I had written, just one other, some blank pages, and then the printer just printer just filled it in with blank pages afterwards. So, because they wanted 24 pages, because that what evidently fits their format for this size book. That's all I really know. So, thank you. Voila.
The 24 pages is the minimum that they can do a hot bind, which is the wax binding that they're talking about. So yeah, you have to do, it's a minimum of 24, but you can do the blank pages like that. You can also have, like you have what they call a half title page, which is just the name of the book, and then the back of that's blank. Then the next one is a full title page, which includes the author, and then the back of that you've got, I always call it the legalese page. It's the, you can't reproduce this, and the copyright issues and those kinds of things. And then you can always have a dedication in the back side of that. So it's pretty easy to come up with the 24 minimum. Mine, the reason I ended up with 2 books is because when I got them totally done, I realized I had almost 300 pages. And for young adults, 13 to 18, they recommend that you don't have anything that's more than 150 pages. 125 to 150 pages seems to be the sweet spot for them holding their interest. So it divided into 2 books very, very easily. I do have to say mine is a chapter book. And the first time I heard that term, I have to share you. A little girl came to me. I used to volunteer at the Sperry Library, and a little girl came to me and she said, "Do you have any chapter books?" Well, I didn't know that term, and I'm thinking she's meaning like, a series like, the Harry Potter books or the babysitting, Judy Blume's babysitting books. And I said, "Well, I don't know. Who's the author?" And she looked at me like, this woman is nuts. She said, "No," she said, "books that have chapters in them for bigger kids." And it's like, and she's speaking really slowly. Like if she speaks really slowly, I'll understand her better. So I learned that term very early on, what a chapter book was. It's just simply a kid's book that has chapters in them it starts in about 4th grade, maybe 4th or 5th grade. So mine are chapter books.
Thanks, Jenny. How about pricing? How did you arrive at the asking price?
Math again. The recommended way to figure out how you price something is you take the cost of your book and you triple it. Because if you go to a standard bookstore or a standard outlet, they're going to want 40% discount from the cover price. So it's just easier to think in thirds. If they're going to take 50% off, if your book costs you $5, your cover price should be around $15. Because it's in your head, it's real easy to say, well, 15, a third of that's $10. That gives me a $5 profit and covers my $5 printing cost. Then you have to stop and think, okay, but is it in the market with the other books? You can look around and see what other books that are very similar to yours are in that same price range. And there's also, of course, the theory of diminishing returns, where you can sell your book for $30, but you might only get one person to buy it. If you sell your book for $9 or $10, although you're making less on each book, if you sell a whole bunch of them, you're going to end up making more money. So you just kind of have to, there's a number of factors to stop and think about. But the general rule of thumb is 3 times your cost.
Oh, I priced this book, the publisher was Dog Ear Publishing, and they're out of business now, but, and I'm now using KDP, but they wanted, they had a price on the back of $12.95, and I thought that was just too much, $13. And I did sell them at first for $13. And I don't know, this one didn't cost me anything to publish. It was Create Space. At the time you just had to present it completely camera ready. So anyway, I sell all my books for $10, and one of them cost me $10 from Mother House, and I'll never use them again. So I don't make anything on that one, but I try to bundle it with something else as well. That's expensive, but it's what the market will hold. When you're sitting at a table at an event, it's easier to sell the books at $10, and it's easier to make change. It's just, you know, I'm not in this business to make money, which I would like to be, but it doesn't matter, I'm not. So anyway, I think just the $10 for me is what the market will hold when I'm at a book fair or something.
I've always used Create Space, which is now KDP. Mm-hmm. And when you do the book and it comes to pricing, they will show you, like you can put in, okay, what if I sell it for this much? And they have a formula and they'll tell you this is what your royalty will be selling online. Of course, you buy from them, your cost is lower, you sell it at an event, and then you do make more per book because they don't take I don't know how it works exactly, but they don't take something that you do make more money when you sell it in person. Although you kind of want people to buy it online because that's a good thing. Oh, look, my book sold. Anyway, so I kind of look at that and I play around with the number and I try to get it as low as possible just to be reasonable. There's a lot of children's books out there. So, you know, if I'm going to price it at $14.99, it better be a really, really good book. So, you know, it is a really, really good book, but someone might not pay that for it, so.
Yes, when Mindster Media sent me the final copy, it was priced at $15.99, and I called them and I said, And I said, why, you didn't ask me what I wanted the price to be. And they said, well, that's because we think that's what it's worth, and that's what we're gonna, and I said, no. I said, I come from a school, I was an elementary principal. Those kids were poor. They would never be able to buy that book at $15.99. So the lowest they would go was $12.99. So that's what it's been, even in the reprint. I just kept that. But at events, you can always say, today, $10. Today, $9.99. So you can play with it that way.
I want to say one more thing. This book, Brinkley, yeah. This book was actually in a store in Burbank that sold, you know, a lot of things people made. It was a really cool store. And I gave her the copies, and I sold them to her like, I think $1 over my cost or something. And she took what I sold. Well, I didn't sell them to her. They were on consignment, so I got them back if they didn't sell. And she made the price like $16. It was really expensive. She actually sold 2 or 3 books in her store, but I thought, you know, you probably would have sold a lot more if you'd sold it at a lower price, you know, but she's the businesswoman, so I assume she knows what she's doing because her store does very well. So.
Let me add one thing. Let's go that way.
Really, really quickly, we haven't talked about the difference, as long as we're talking pricing of books, we haven't talked about the difference between color and black and white. On books as small as the 24 pages, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. With KDP, a black and white book with 24 pages would cost you $2.15. And if it was a color book, it would cost you $3.65. So there's not that big of a difference. One thing you have to keep in mind is if you have even one color drawing in your book, they charge you the color price for every single page. So you have to figure that in. Just as but the black and white books, that $2.15 cost is fixed until you get over 108 pages. So if you've got 108 pages, you're still going to pay $2.15. If you go with color pages, that $3.85 price is only fixed until you get up to 40 pages. Once you get over 40 pages in a color book, you add 7 cents a page to anything over 40 pages. So you also have to stop and think, well, if money's an issue with you, you have to stop and think whether or not your book will be effective with black and white illustrations as opposed to color, because if you start getting up over 50 or 60 pages, that color price can start to really mount up.
True. I used to be a real estate appraiser, and I can tell you this, cost does not equal value. You know, you could overspend building a house, and it's not going to sell for what you spent for it. And same thing with these books. The best way to be fairly accurate is to look at what books are selling for in that area that are somewhat similar to what you're selling. And then don't spend more money than that in producing your book. You won't make any profit. Because I always used to tell people when they were unhappy with my appraisal, the marketplace does not lie. Okay, here's the facts, and this is what it is. So anyway, we're at break time. Let's take a break. Let's get some refreshments. Let's meet and greet and visit, and I will call somehow, I'll probably have to use the microphone, call the meeting back to order, and we will go into our Q&A session, okay? Please, what do you have that you'd like to have answered regarding this topic? Go to Bob first.
Yeah, real quick, on the fiber, it's just fiverr.com?
FIVERR.
2 R's?
2 R's.
Okay.
.com.
And then the other one that Jenny mentioned was Pixel, is that correct?
It is.
Go ahead, Roberta, if you know.
Oh, I answered. What? Pixabay.
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 PIXABAY.com. They will ask you to join, but it's free. You don't have to pay anything. They just want you to go ahead and register so that you can log back in again. And maybe they keep track of who downloads what, I suppose. You don't have to pay anything, but they do ask you politely to credit whoever the artist was when you used their work.
Rusty, I see you, but I saw Linda first. Let's do Linda. Linda.
On the illustrations you have in your book, if you have pictures in the book and you have colored pictures, will it print them in black and white?
Yes, if you tell them you want a black and white book, yes.
Well, it's your choice. You have a choice.
You don't, when I first started doing books, I thought, okay, I have to grayscale them all before I put them in the book. You don't. You can use colored graphics. As long as you tell them you're printing black and white, it'll come out grayscale.
Linda, I have 2 pictures in my my memoir that I wanted to be in color. The rest of them didn't matter, but they don't show up well in black and white at all. You can't tell what they are. So I was publishing with KDP, and they were going to charge me as if the whole book had colored pictures in it. It was going to be 3 times as much, so I left them black and white. I had to bite the bullet. So yeah, it just depends, I think, maybe on your publisher, but you can distinguish what you want.
Okay, Mike.
I'm getting, we have 9 people today on Zoom who are joining us,
Okay.
and they're requesting that we repeat the questions and use the microphone for the answers.
Okay, Rusty, go ahead.
Okay, back in the day in journalism, you had to, if you had a graphic or a picture illustration, it had to be 2.5 times larger than was going to be printed, because it would reduce it down to clean it up and set up what we call now the DPI. So is that something that still happens, or is
Okay, the question is, in the past, you had to submit the picture larger so it would be reduced. Is it still that way?
I can't speak for, if you're turning in the artwork separately and you're asking them to put the book together, I can't answer. But from my standpoint, use my scanner, and a scanner will scan up to 24 dots per inch, so you can pretty much enlarge something that's really small. So but if you're going to give me original artwork that I know I'm going to have to scan in, it either has to fit on my flatbed scanner, or I have to stitch it together, which gets kind of difficult to stitch it in pieces. So the answer is no. You want to, in today's world, as far as I'm concerned, you want to make it the size that you want the finished product to be. And then I scan it in. And that you also have to use good quality paper, because scanners today pick up every little thing. So if you're particularly for watercolors, colored pencil, that kind of stuff, make sure you're using a real high quality paper, because then you'll get a much better scan out of it.
Okay. I had a comment as well. People seemed a little confused by why there's extra pages in your book at the end. And that goes way back to before I was born, that the industry works in signatures. And a signature is 4 pages. And so everything is cut into 4. So if you have 4 pages left over in the back of the book, that's where that comes from. It has to do with cutting and trimming process. And I guess it hasn't changed even since we got digital. So when I was working for Mojave Copy, I was one of their graphic artists. And so I had to play within that concept of using boards. Let me know what that is.
Okay, for those on Zoom, Rusty shared with us that the way that the publishers print, they print with 4s, and that's why oftentimes you might get 4 blank pages at the end. Apparently they've been doing it for a very long time, and they're still doing it.
Any other questions for our panel? Questions for our panel? Bob?
Yeah, I wanted to ask Mary if Ms. Kickenberg,
on Samantha Kickenberg, did she do all of your books? Did I understand you correctly? Did she illustrate all of them?
All the children's books, yes.
All of the children's books, yes. So she did the Blue Tongue and all that. Okay.
Right, and she's got her own Facebook page. She's got a partner, and it's called Breadcrumbs. So, for instance, on this book, she's not mentioned, but inside it says Breadcrumbs Incorporated. So she's formed her own company after leaving the other company where I found her.
Okay, thank you very much.
Right?
I think Joan has a question.
Sorry. Okay.
Is there any difference as far as color? What if you use photographs? Is there any difference with using illustrations or sketches versus photographs?
For my memoir, I took pictures of the old photographs with my cell phone, sent them to my computer, picked them up on the Word, and incorporated them exactly where I wanted them in the chapters. And that's the one I wanted 2 pictures, color, but they're all black and white. And they're not crisp or anything, but you can sure see them. And there's no scanning, nothing else. It was very quick and easy. Because some of the things were from, well, I'm in my 80s, so they're from when I was 2, 3, actually when I was a baby. So they came out pretty well.
Thank you. Any other questions? How many of you think you might ever write a children's book?
All right.
Good. Yeah. I think I'm going to. I think maybe I already have.
I should probably know the answer to this, but is there a critique group for the children's books? Children's books?
Unfortunately, there isn't, but
We're looking for volunteers.
yes, somebody should start one because we have 10 published children's writers at least, and we did have a children's salon one time, which was a one-time meeting where we talked about our books and selling them and things we could do and that kind of thing. But there needs to be one, and like I said, I brought mine to an open genre wordsmiths, which was our first critique group ever, and that's where I brought it because I needed to bring stuff to it. So
Mary, what happened to Suzanne's? I thought she had one children's book run.
it started and it met a few times, and then it became a teaching thing on the part of Suzanne, and people weren't finishing all their assignments. So it kind of fizzled out. But yeah, decide how you want to run it maybe before you open it, because one person shouldn't be the teacher of a critique group. Yeah.
Thanks.
Very quickly, one of the things that we didn't touch on as far as writing children's books is you need to know the age of your audience, because you have to be careful with your word choices. There are websites that will tell you what the average vocabulary is, standard vocabulary is for different age groups. Ann and I talked about this. She uses the word luscious in her book, and she got several comments from people that, oh, you can't use that word, people aren't going to know what it means. Well, it's kind of a given standard in it, at least what I learned when I was getting my elementary credentials, is that if you can use 3 to 5 new words in a book, that's okay, because the kids will be interested in learning what that word is, particularly if you have a way that you can kind of tell them what it means in the context of the story. But if you are writing for, say, a 5-year-old, and you're writing, in the vocabulary that the poor kid's going to have to use a dictionary for every other word, and they're going to lose interest very, very quickly. So you need to know your age group before you start writing so that you can tailor your vocabulary to them.
Good point. Anyone else? Oh, Mike.
In the Zoom, we got a question from the chat. Actually, Anita, you want to ask your question? I see you waving your hand. Go ahead, unmute yourself.
I was wondering, is this going to work for you to hear? Because I'm getting staticky noise. Yes, you can hear?
Yes.
Okay. How's your promotion for your children's books different from your promotion for your adult books, and how have those been successful or not? Thanks.
I basically rely on Amazon because I hate marketing. So I just take all of my books and tell people, if a young kid walks by, high school kid, I might say, hey, you look like a reader. Come and see that. I've got this book over here. But as far as actively marketing and making an issue out of it, I just don't like the subject, so I don't go there, which is probably why I don't sell very many books.
I don't have anything special. I just, sometimes I put something on Facebook and say the next edition is out or the next printing or something, but I don't have anything especially that I do.
I haven't done anything different either. I could tell you what I used to do until Goodreads started to charge. You could do a giveaway, and it was a good way to get some reviews online. You could offer one book, you could offer 10 books, however many, and what it cost you was the cost of the book and the shipping. And they picked the winner of, like if you say you want to give 5 away, and they would randomly pick it. Well, they changed their process. It used to be free for the author to do that, and then you got some reviews, but now they charge you like $100 and some. They charge companies more, and it really bugged me because they're Amazon and they already make a lot of money, so why can't they allow us little authors this little perk that they used to give? So I haven't done that, but I've been tempted to, because when you have a new book and you need to get reviews, you can ask your friends, but if they figure out that it's a friend doing it, or for some reason they think, oh, that person shouldn't be reviewing your book, they'll kick it. And they'll take it down too if they decide later on, oh, no, you know each other or something like that. I think if you say up front, this is someone you know, they'll go ahead and let the review go through. But it was a good way to get reviews from people you don't know, and then also you got, the full truth. They're not going to necessarily be nice to you. They don't know you. They got the book for free, and you could see how they reacted to it. So it might still be worth doing it, even though they charge you.
Well, great question, and two things, and I'm going to mention you, Mary Ruth. First of all, your swag. When people get excited about the book, like my son said, oh, shortly after it came out, if they ate a blue Tootsie Pop, their own tongues will turn blue. So at events, I always have the blue raspberry Tootsie Pop, and I take pictures of the kids who start eating them right away and ask the mom if I can put that on Facebook. And so that's become a big part of it. And people have made suggestions too. So your swag is really important. That's what they call that. And book reviews from kids themselves, and ask the parent. Say, oh, you're telling me the kid likes it? Have them write a review on Amazon, and I've got a couple of those, and those are the best reviews if you ask me. Also, because I was a principal, I know that you have to meet the teachers and get your books into the schools if you want them to take off and you really want to make some money. And when I was a principal, I had 2 authors come. One gave me a reduced price of $300 to come do an assembly, and because she had one of my teachers as a student, so she would do that as a favor. And I thought, whoa, $300. Okay, but she also stayed and did a workshop for the kids in writing. And I know Mary Hughes has had contracts with for assemblies and gone into schools. And she also was put up one night in a hotel. And so you have to get into schools. The best author was called Mr. Mike. And he came at the beginning of the year and had a contract. And he would send, and if you ever want to do this, because I handed these out at our children's salon, Mr. Mike had a whole contract where every month he sent me a reminder to the teachers or something for the kids to do, and a reminder to make an announcement that Mr. Mike was coming on this particular date, save your money. He came and did an assembly, and near the end of the year, the parents and kids were lined up out the door for his $16 book that he sold, and I had to run in there at the very end and get my copies for my nieces and nephews because he was doing the signing. But he spent all year, and I didn't have to do anything except, oh, here was the reminder. Remind the teachers Mr. Mike was coming. And he really did well, and I know he did this with lots of schools. So think of that in terms of when you get your book, meet teachers. Mike came and spoke to my Delta Kappa Gamma group, which is a group of women educators, because his program, when he was a teacher, was getting books into the hands of new parents at St. Mary's as soon as they're born, books for babies, and encouraging new mothers to read to their kids as soon as they're born. And so he came and talked to those teachers, and so that they knew about that program. So you find teachers, that's where the kids are, in school. And they read aloud books, and K through 12.
Are there any other questions? Oh, wow.
How many of you
Hold on, they can't hear you.
How many of you have your web page on Amazon? Oh, good. Well, I was just going to tell people that I used to have my own website. And, I created that, and then I had my MaryRuthHughes.com. So if anybody went there, it'd take them to that website. And, of course, I was paying for all that. Well, Amazon has it now, and they have all of my books up there. They have, you can open the book and read a little bit in it. It has my biography. They did a beautiful job, and then I called up GoDaddy, who I buy my domain name from, MaryRuthHughes.com. So anyone who goes to MaryRuthHughes.com, it takes them to that page. So I don't have to have my own website or create it or pay for it. And I just wondered if anybody else in here has done that. And Roberta held up her hand,
Yes,
so.
I learned that from you. So.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
But I
Yeah.
also have my own website.
Right.
You got something?
Well, I was just going to talk about when she mentioned that I did a class at Cal State Fullerton. And the way that came about, and I'll just be real brief, I had gone to Orange County Children's Book Fair, and I paid $75 for a half a table for 4 hours. Well, Jamie Lee Curtis was there and everything, and people were lined up to buy her book. I didn't sell one book. But a lady came by. I had all my cards, my business cards on the table. And she took one, and I'm going, well, that was a bummer. I sat there 4 hours, didn't sell anything, paid the $75. A few days later, I received a phone call, and it was from the lady that had taken my card. Well, she was a teacher at Cal State Fullerton, and she asked me to come and teach an hour class, and that they would put everything up on the big screen and do the PowerPoint, the whole thing. They would put me up in a hotel that night to go down there, so I didn't have to drive the same day. And they paid me a little over $300. So you never know where you're going to.
They should have, because you spent $75 to go there, right? Good story. Joan, did you have your hand up? Carol.
That just leads into the comment that I've often heard Jenny share, is that even if you go to an event and you don't sell any books that day, if people pick up your business card or bookmarks or something that promotes what you're offering, you may hear from them the next day, the next week, the next month. You never know how it's going to get around. So don't feel that it's a waste of time and effort.
That's true, and Jenny is an example of that with your editing in New York, right?
Yeah.
Well, wasn't it the LA?
We went to the LA Times Festival of Books, and like Mary Ruth, I didn't sell a single book, but we were giving, I think Mike Raff and Dwight wandered around, and they were handing out my business cards for me, because of course I don't amble around very well. And I thought, what a waste, total waste. I'm never going to do that again. But about 3 months later, I get a call from some people in Washington, D.C. And the lady said, we have your business card. Are you still doing editing? And I went, yes, but how did you get my business card? She goes, well, we were at the LA Festival of Books, and so it has been, financially, it has been very, very lucrative for me. I've worked for them now for, it's been 5 or 6 years, I think, since we went to the festival, and they just continue to give me work all the time. So you just never know. It's never write off an experience. You never know when something's going to come. Or you may talk to a dozen people and they don't buy the book, and then all of a sudden you get 3 or 4 or 5 sales from Amazon. It could very well be those people that didn't buy it at the fair but then went and bought it from Amazon. So it's never a waste of time to talk about what you do.
Well, and I apologize to people on Zoom that did not get to hear it. Maybe because you're Jenny, you don't need a microphone.
They might have heard.
So Jenny was saying that she had someone give out one of her cards, at the Festival of Books in Los Angeles that one year that we went. And 3 months later, she gets a call from this editing company in Washington, D.C. And the rest, as they say, is history. Jenny's been hot and heavy on the editing for Washington, D.C. and New York. So this is great. We have a drawing to do. Mike, you ready?
I got more stuff.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you do. I'm sorry. I know. It's tough to remember everything.
How'd you forget me? Hi. I just had a couple of points I want to tell you. I have some notes. If anybody wants them, you can have them. Just a couple of things about a technique. Think backwards and write the ending of your book first if you need to do that. I basically want to share this. I have several books here that are still in print. I checked out. One's From Inspiration to Publication. It's set up for children, but it has some great ideas for writing any novels or any kind of writing. Word Magic. I wanted to share. For instance, specifics create interest. It talks about using certain things, like if you just say blue, instead you could say robin egg blue, or you say the house, instead it could be a squat one-story brick rambler. A tree could be a 15-foot leafless crabapple, and a highway could be County Road 15. In other words, get into the details on that. This is a book by Catherine Woolley, who's author of 87 children's books, and it's called Writing for Children. It's still on Amazon used or somewhere, eBay or someplace. I looked that up. And then there's a lot of books that you can get at Barnes & Noble up to date. They're pretty expensive, but if you buy last year's, you get most of the information on marketing and illustrations and that sort of thing. Marketing for children's magazines and books. And that's just a few of those things. Well, I had some other things I wanted to share, but I won't take any more of your time. So if anybody wants my notes, you're welcome to them. Hey, it's so good to see everybody here today.
All right. Mike, if you can distribute what you're going to distribute. I'm going to tell a little story while you're doing that about my brother. My brother's pretty well off financially. Always had money on his mind as he was growing up and doing good things. And I never cared that much about it. But my brother would come to my father and he'd say, "Hey, Dad, can I use the lawnmower to make some extra money?" My father said, "Sure you can, son." And so I drove by the house a little bit later, and sure enough, I see the lawnmower out in the front yard with a for sale sign on it. And so he sold it for $35. So, you know, oh yeah. So, those are the things. By the way, I found someplace. Are you distributing things? They got their. All right, good. Just real quick. I found out from the internet that it is impossible to lick your elbow. I don't know if you knew that. And studies show that more than 50% of everybody who just heard that will try to lick their elbow later today. Okay, all right.